Welcome and happy Halloween. I'm Quinn Walcott. I'm the Business and Program Manager of Summit Historical Society. Summit Historical Society is a member organization. That means we get our support from you through donations and your membership. We're so proud to offer this program and so that you are able to experience some of the darker sides of Summit County. Now I'd like you to sit back and relax and enjoy this wonderful presentation and theatrical performance by Robert Jones in Grim Stories of Summit County.
Happy Halloween, and welcome to Grim Stories of Summit County. We invite you to sit back and relax as we tell you some stories found in the local newspaper of Summit County from 1883 to 1915. Both fact and fiction, these stories involve murder, foul play, terrible accidents, some humor, and some ideas for your next Halloween party. I am your host, Mr. Jones, and let us explore the darker side of Summit County, shall we? Yes. Breckenridge Bulletin, March 14th, 1903. Seeing a ghost. When you think you see a ghost, how can you tell whether it really is a ghost or not? A recent writer gives the following scientific method. We assume that a person sees an apparition. It may be objective, having existence outside of the observer's mind, or merely a creature of a disordered brain, subjective. The seer, while looking at the vision with both of his eyes, gently depressed one eyeball with his forefinger from outside the top eyelid, so causing a squint. If objective, whether bogus or not, two outlines of the ghost will be seen, but one, of course, if it is to be subjective. One may prove this trial any time with any object near or far. I mention this because of many nervous and brain-weary people who see spooks and to whom it would be better that they should know that the trouble is within themselves and so seek a capable doctor, then continue to be haunted as they believe by the supernatural. Poor fools. Summit County Journal and a Breckenridge Bulletin, August 2nd, 1912. Ghost event bothering you. To feel a hot breath of air strike you at twilight, signified by the nearby presence of a ghost. Should you wish to avoid him, stop and turn your coat and trousers and hat wrong side out, and the spirit cannot encounter you. If, however, he is a pugnacious sprite and approaches despite the change, turn and address him thus, in the name of the Lord, what do you want? Whereupon he will tell you his business here on earth, then depart and never trouble you again. If, on the other hand, it is a prowling ghost who crawls under the house, bumps against the floor, makes strange sounds and whispers in the midnight hour, you may have only to put on a new floor, and he will do so no more. Some ghosts are obtrusive and will not only prowl about the house, but creep in through the crack of the door in the wee small hours of the night, and once inside expand to vast proportions. To spare yourself any disturbance in this way, sow mustard seeds all about the doorstep, just before going to bed, or place a sieve on the doorstep. Before entering, the spirit will have to count all the holes in the salve, or all the mustard seeds, and by this time daylight will come and he will have to go. As the encountering from one night will not do for another, you are always safe. While ghosts and ghouls and spooky creatures that go bump in the night run rampant on Halloween night, oftentimes our Halloween classic movies are on murder and mayhem. Here are a few local murders and strange occurrences that are from our own Colorado history. Breckenridge Bulletin, February 23rd, 1901. Arrested for Aspen murder. It is quite evident that the murder of Miss Green, which occurred in Aspen 2 weeks ago, is shrouded in considerable mystery. and the sheriff of Pickton County, who arrived this afternoon, is of the opinion that in the arrest of Molly Gates in Leadville, today he has the most important person in the mystery. Molly Gates came to Leadville a few days after the murder was discovered in Aspen, and while she disclaims any connection with the affair, the sheriff says he has a most important testimony against the woman secured through the arrest made in Pickton County. Miss Green lived in a small cabin in Aspen, and at 12 o'clock at night 2 weeks ago, the cabin was found in flames, and after the fire was extinguished, the Green woman was missing. Later, her charred remains were found in the debris, and the horrible discovery was made that her head was missing. The sheriff has been investigating the matter, and as a result, a woman by the name of Lucy Moore was arrested in Aspen. And though her testimony was secured, which led the sheriff to secure a warrant charging Molly Gates of the Leadville with murder, the sheriff is of the opinion that Miss Green was murdered for the money she had in her house. And according to the testimony of Luck Milmore, the Gates woman was with Miss Green on the night of the murder. It is thought that Miss Green was killed and decapitated, and then the building set on fire with the belief that the body would be entirely burned up and the murder never discovered. The head has yet to be located by Aspen authorities. Molly Gates strongly protests that she knows neither of the murder and that she did not run from the Aspen to hide from the crime. Cornelius, what do you think of this? I think it's crazy as well. Yes, let us continue. Breckenridge Bulletin, February 23rd, 1901. Arrested for Aspen murder. It is quite evident that the murder of Miss Green, which occurred in Aspen 2 weeks ago, is shrouded in considerable mystery, and the sheriff of Pickton County, who arrived this afternoon, is of the opinion that in the arrest of Molly Gates in Leadville today, he has a most important person of mystery. Molly Gates came to Leadville a few days after the murder was discovered in Aspen, and while she disclaims any connection with the affair, the sheriff says he has a most important testimony against the woman secured through the arrest made in Pickton County. Miss Green lived in a small cabin in Aspen, and at 12 o'clock at night 2 weeks ago, the cabin was found in flames. After the fire was extinguished, the Green woman was missing. Later, her charred remains were found in the debris, and the horrible discovery was made that the head was missing. The sheriff has been investigating the matter, and as a result, a woman by the name of Lucy Moore was arrested in Aspen, and through her testimony was secured, which led the sheriff to secure a warrant charging Molly Gates of Leadville with murder. The sheriff is of the opinion that Miss Green was murdered for the money she had in her house, and according to the testimony of Miss Luck Moore, the Gates woman was with Miss Green on the night of the murder. It is thought that Miss Green was killed and decapitated, and then the building set on fire with the belief that the body would be entirely burned up, and the murder never discovered. The head, though, has yet to be discovered by Aspen authorities. Molly Gates strongly protests that she knows neither of the murder and that she did not run away from the Aspen to hide the crime. Moving on to Summit County Journal, Breckenridge Bulletin, December 9th, 1911. Montezuma Mill Run, September 15th, 1883. A sudden death. A sudden death on Tuesday morning. The body of Charles S. Smith was found in his cabin in St. John. The deceased came to Montezuma in May 1881. He worked on the Hidden Treasure for Bartlett, then worked on the Yorkshire and on the Mark Twain Loan, and for that company since May 1882. On Monday morning, as the deceased was returning from work, he met Mr. Story, who handed him a bucket of milk. which was found undisturbed on the table the next morning. The body was discovered on Tuesday morning by W.M. Horn, who batched with the deceased, Mr. Smith, had evidently walked into the cabin, set the milk on the table, and laid down on the Horn's bunk and gently dropped into his last sleep. He was lying on his back in an easy position with a pillow under his head. There was no evidence of him having suffered at all. His remains were brought to town Tuesday morning after Judge T.R. Newman, acting coroner, held an inquest on them with the following results. William Horn, being duty sworn, states that he has been batching with Charles Smith for some time, and that the deceased had been failing in strength for 2 or 3 weeks. That he eats his supper on the night of September 10th and started to work at the St. Elmo Tunnel. The deceased was late coming home that night, and he did not see him. He further stated that he came home from work at 4 o'clock in the morning and found the cabin door open. He entered the cabin, he lit a match, looked at the deceased's bed but did not see him, and saw his bed had not been slept in. He then went to the door and called Mrs. Smith, but Smith had now received no answer. He then went back into the cabin and lit a candle and looked at his own bed, and there lay the deceased. On his back, he felt his hands and found that they were cold and stiff. Matt Williams, being duly sworn, said that on September 9th, the deceased told him he was feeling very bad and intended to leave for Kansas in 2 weeks. If anything should happen to him and he was liable to die at any moment, he wanted Williams to look after his property and administer on his estates. George Story, being duly sworn, said that he met the deceased on Monday evening and gave him the milk. The deceased complained of feeling very tired, and the deceased was steadily a sober man, a good citizen, and we do not believe he had any enemies in the county. Yet no one knows what truly happened to Charles on that fateful day. Moving on to Breckenridge Bulletin, October 5th, 1907. Accident or suicide? After a search of 11 flowers through the miles of the underground workings of the Portland mine, the body of A.B. Bain, for years a rancher living 17 miles from Florence, was found at the bottom of a big stope on the Dillon mine. Whether he purposely leaped to death, was pushed, or fell by accident is not known. Peculiar circumstances surround the death. Bain came in from his ranch, applied for work at Portland, and was put on the 6 o'clock shift. He told several of the miners he did not have to work but wanted a change of surroundings, as he had been beaten out of a large sum of money by a partner and wanted something to keep his thoughts from his misery. When cautioned to be careful in getting off the cage, Bain said it did not make a difference whether he was killed or not. Shortly afterward, he was missed by the men on the level and an alarm was given. A search was begun and the body was found 300 feet down the Dillon stope. Bain had wandered to where the Dillon and Portland properties connected and either had fallen or leaped or was pushed down the stope from the Dillon mine. Now, not all stories told on Halloween need to be dark and gloomy. In fact, we continue our story with a bit of comedy from the newspaper. Summit County Journal and Breckenridge Bulletin, December 9th, 1911. A natural ending. Our cook's dead! Indeed! Did she die a natural death? Yes! The natural death of a person who tries to light a fire with a kerosene! No. Well, maybe this next story will work for you. Montezuma Mill Run, October 6th, 1883. Taking Time by the Forelock.
I want to put a death notice in the paper, but I want to leave the date
of the date of the death blank. Can I do that? Asked a man of the advertising clerk the other day. Don't you know the date? Inquired the clerk, a little startled by the request. No, not yet, replied the man. Fact is, it's my wife. She isn't dead. But the doctor says she's got a peg out sometime tonight. And I have ordered the funeral for tomorrow, so I can't leave town until the afternoon. Can you fix the notice? Have you seen the undertaker? Asked the clerk, interested by the man's quiet business-like air. Oh, yeah! And he's made all the arrangements. He's measured her for the coffin with his eye, and I don't think she's having a rheumatose notion what his game was. I have notified all the friends and family, and my mourning suit is around at the tailor's waiting for me to try on. The only thing is about this notice. If I can arrange that I am all right, stick it in. She won't see the paper, and if she does, I'll tell her it is another woman of the same name. All right, replied the clerk. I'll fix it. Much obliged, sighed the bereaved of the bereaved. I'll do as much for you sometime. Now I've got to go back and look at some flowers. Come have a drink with me sometimes. We've got a few moments to spare. But the clerk declined, and with thanks, the mourner went on his way in a quest of a florist who would contract to furnish flowers with the understanding that if anything slipped up, he would take them back and refund all his money. Breckenridge Bulletin, May 13th, 1909. A natural conclusion. One man asked another, do you think Bangs will succeed in the works he has taken up? He hasn't the ghost of a chance, the second man replied. Well, why not? Because he hasn't the spirit. Well, a good laugh would be enjoyed by the miners of the time. Their lives were hard and oftentimes dangerous. Accidents on the job were common and a risk of the job at hand. Here are a few of those tragedies that ended in casualties. Summit County Journal and Breckenridge Bulletin, December 12th, 1913. Killed by cave-in. Cave-in crushed life out of young miner. Lives only a short time. Horace Morrison, one of the best-known young men in this section of the county, met an untimely death at the Wellington mine Saturday afternoon where he was employed. He was working on the stope between the first and second levels, engaged in timbering, and was making an effort to reinforce an old stole which was buckled with the weight of a hanging wall. In cutting the hitch for the new stall, it fell in on him, burying him under a pile of rock and dirt 10 feet long and over 3 feet deep, the hanging wall pinning him in the stall. Jess Oakley tenderly picked him out of the debris and carried him up 70 feet up a ladder to a narrow passageway on the first level, where he remained until medical assistance arrived. Morrison was conscious until ether was administered in an attempt made to set his hip when he expired from internal bleeding. Summit County Journal and Breckenridge Bulletin, November 7th, 1913. Kokomo items. Monday morning, the little town was made sad by the news of Mr. Johnson. He was killed by a cave-in at Boston Mine, but none fessed so sad as those who were in charge of that mine. It being the first death at the mine since it started, friends of the deceased came over from Leadville and took charge of the body. The whole community and mine owners sympathized with the family and friends. Of course, with such occurrences, miners and the residents of the time like to have entertainment, including moving pictures such as what we enjoy today. These movies, though, were much different than they are today, as they would have no sound and would have been in black and white. And oftentimes, the actors were put into dangerous situations. This entrepreneur in the next article takes full advantage of the darker side of film. The Blue Valley Times, September 27th, 1912. Drew the crowd. It was the ambition of the proprietor of the moving picture show to get a record house that week. The first 2 nights, he failed to get it. On the 3rd night, his unparalleled attractions were advertised thus through a megaphone at the hall door. Ladies and gentlemen, every picture I shall show you tonight has cost the life of a film actor. In the bridge wrecking scene, 2 men were drowned in the railroad collision. 1 man was crushed to death, and in the jungle scene, 3 men were fearfully mangled by wild beasts. Reprehensible tactics, to mention those harrowing details, said the proprietors of the show. Nevertheless, they achieved the manager's purpose. For the next day, the house was packed at every performance. Now, our last few stories touch on Halloween itself. While there are many grim stories that are associated with Halloween, this is a time of enjoying friends and family. And stepping out of the norm for one night, adorning costumes, and indulging in candy. It is not a new custom. Nor are Halloween parties. While this year is very different, we can still appreciate how some in the past have enjoyed Halloween, both in similarity and different to our own customs and celebrations. Summit County Journal, November 6th, 1915. Little tots see strange things at Halloween party. Little Ferda and Evelyn Watts were hostesses Saturday afternoon. Yes, those were their names. When 20 little folks were invited to a Halloween party, the rooms were decorated with black and orange and were darkened for the occasion. Weird faces, black cats, lighted pumpkins, and all in fantastic shapes peered through the autumn leaves and from various nooks and crannies. To the great amazements of his little guest, after jolly games appropriate to the occasion, pumpkin pie, popcorn, fruit, candy, and orangeade were served. Orangeade. Each little one departed declaring that they had had the best time ever while drinking orangeade. Yes. Moving on from the orangeade. Summit County Journal, October 24th, 1908. A cold Halloween supper. A young man who feels the weight of his social obligation and who has a most obliging mother and sister has asked his guests to a cold supper on the night of Halloween. 4 girls and 4 men. This is what it is to be like. First, the dining room is to be decorated with unusual Halloween symbols, candles furnishing the only light. After the guests are seated at the table, they are to be informed that they must pass whatever is passed to them and not to look. Above all, not to drop any of these objects. The first article is to be a potato stuck full of toothpicks. Then a mechanical door toy, for instance a beetle or a big fly, one that will keep in motion for several minutes. A piece of fur, a jointed Japanese snake, and a bit of ice are objects that will call forth the shrieks. A yard or toe of sausage casing blown up, and a glove filled with either sand or water. These will fill the hearts with terror. All these articles will and have been in the ice chest for about 12 hours so as to be thoroughly cold. When all the articles have all been returned to the basket at the feet of the hostess, it will be funny enough to hear the comments as to what these things are. The first, of course, of the real supper is to be oyster cocktails, then a regular supper menu. With the dessert, a huge pumpkin will be passed, into which each guest will put his hand, drawing out some quaint Halloween favors. Cabbages, cabbages, cabbages. When the hour for departure comes, the men will be led to a window box in which as many cabbages as there are ladies present will be growling. They will be pulled on the root, and the root will be found the name of the lady who is to be protected from the witches and the goblins that may be encountered on the way home. In olden days, Halloween was sometimes called, and I quote, Cabbage Night. And fortunes were told by going into a cabbage patch and pulling on the heads where one's future mate was determined by a crooked or straight root. Yes. Now, we want to thank you for joining us today and exploring some of these grim stories of Summit County, and hope you enjoyed our program today. Now, the Summit Historical Society is here to preserve and tell the stories of all of Summit County, Colorado. As a member of the organization, we are not supported by a government agency, but by you. If you are not already, please consider being a member today. Your membership helps us pursue our mission and create a wonderful programming such as this. Thank you, and happy Halloween.